Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So, for this video right here, I want to talk about Jeff Sessions, the Justice Department, and their decision to enforce marijuana laws. Now, we know that several jurisdictions have passed laws legalizing the use and sale of marijuana. For instance, we have California, where they actually have shops set up, dispensaries, where people can actually go in and purchase marijuana just like you would purchase any other product publicly and openly. So they have these little weed shops where people can purchase different types of marijuana and they can actually smoke it, and people can smoke it publicly now in California. Much like how you go to a Starbucks and you buy a cup of coffee and you can drink it and purchase it with no problem. Well, that's what they're doing to marijuana in places like California and other jurisdictions. There are other places where you can do the same thing. Now, under the Obama administration, the federal government decided that they would not strictly enforce marijuana laws in those particular jurisdictions. So even though you have these local governments that have decided to legalize marijuana, there's still a federal law against the use and sale of marijuana. So technically, it's still a violation of the law, even though these particular states have passed these laws. So technically, the federal government can go in and prosecute people in California, for instance, who are selling marijuana. They could prosecute them under federal law. So under the Obama administration, they decided, well, that they were not going to enforce those federal laws against marijuana. They would not enforce them in these jurisdictions where people had decided to legalize marijuana. And now that you have the Trump administration, you had this Jeff Sessions as the U.S. Attorney General, they have decided to rescind that Obama era policy. So now that means that the federal government can go in these states like California, and I think Denver was another one of them. They can go into these states and start arresting people who have these shops. They can start shutting these shops down and all that kind of stuff, and arresting people for using marijuana. And so what I want to do is just take some time to share my thoughts. The first thing that I'll say is this. I think that the whole war on drugs is a failure. No matter what kind of federal laws people have in place, people are going to continue to buy and use marijuana. They're going to continue to sell it regardless of what laws are put in place. Much like during Prohibition, where it was actually illegal to use and sell alcohol. But despite that prohibition, people continue to use and sell alcohol. So despite, these laws being in place, it has done nothing to stop people from using and buying marijuana and selling marijuana. All it has done is help contribute to the problem of mass incarceration in this society. And we know that that problem of mass incarceration primarily and disproportionately affects African American people and Latinos. So even though, as Michelle Alexander pointed out in her masterpiece, The New Jim Crow, even though you have black people and white people using and selling drugs at similar rates, you have black communities being targeted for arrest, black communities being targeted for harsh sentences, black communities being targeted for harassment. And for those reasons, I support the legalization of marijuana. Now, I don't support it because I condone the use of marijuana. I've never smoked weed, don't plan to ever smoke weed. I don't condone it. I don't encourage it. But just from a law enforcement perspective, I think that it is a massive waste of federal resources to be arresting people for using small amounts and selling small amounts of marijuana. It is a waste of resources. There are more important things that this government needs to be worried about. And we just have to reflect on the messed up priorities of Jeff Sessions and the Trump administration. Here you have a man, Jeff Sessions, who joked about how he didn't have any problem with the KKK. He thought that they were fine. He thought that it was fine to have an organization that was based on terrorism against black people, an organization that bombed churches, an organization that lynched black people, burned black people, shot black people. He had no problem with that organization until he found out that these people, some of them were using marijuana, that some of those Klansmen were using marijuana. This man is more concerned with marijuana uses than he is with fighting white supremacist terrorism, etc. And it's no surprise because that man is a white supremacist. Now, you know, it's crazy, man. And we have to reflect on a larger issue. We have a federal government that is no longer using its resources, directing its resources to fighting against these white supremacist terrorist groups. They have decided that they are no longer going to focus on those groups. They're no longer going to focus on these white supremacist groups, despite all these incidents, despite the massacre that Dylan Roof committed, despite all these incidents that you hear about with these white supremacists and their plots against the government and against individuals. They have decided that that's not a priority. But instead of focusing on them, they just want to focus on these Middle Eastern terrorists, these so-called Muslim terrorists. They want to focus on them. And now they want to focus on this marijuana thing, which is not a priority in the big scheme of things. There are far more important matters that need to be addressed, like violent crime in poor communities. You know, the gangs and all that kind of stuff. You know, hardcore drugs. Those things need to be more of a priority than cracking down on somebody for smoking some marijuana. I mean, it just tells you how ridiculous these people are that are in power right now. And also, it's just a reminder of how important these elections are. You know, people constantly say, well, elections don't matter. You have these fake people on here, these fake pro-blacks on here telling you that it doesn't matter who's elected. And now we're seeing very real and practical differences between the Obama administration and this Trump administration. You know, this is one example. You know, you have this Obama administration that was trying to address the problem of mass incarceration, you know, by, for instance, granting clemency to people who were nonviolent drug offenders, you know, for instance, not strictly enforcing these marijuana laws. And now you have this Trump administration that is actually going out of their way to enforce these laws. And we know who will bear the brunt of such enforcement. It will be black people. Black people will bear that brunt. And it's a shame. And before I close, there's one other thing that I want to mention that Michelle Alexander talked about with this whole legalization of marijuana in these particular places. You know, you still have people that are incarcerated behind, you know, selling or using marijuana. Many of these people are African American. Nothing is being done to free those people. You know, now that these particular jurisdictions have changed the laws, they need to free all those people that were locked up or who have, you know, faced other types of penalties. They need to free them, exonerate them, now that it has become legal for people to use and sell marijuana in those particular jurisdictions. And also the issue of access to this industry needs to be addressed as well. You know, the fact that you have this industry that is dominated by these young white men and women, and black people are being pushed out of that market. And, you know, a lot of the black people are going to be forced to, again, you know, the people that participate in this are going to be forced to participate in underground markets instead of being able to reap the benefits of this legalization of marijuana. So those are my thoughts about this. Tell me what y'all think. What do you think about the legalization of marijuana? What do you think about the Trump administration's approach to this issue? And what do you think about this whole issue of mass incarceration and discriminatory enforcement of drug laws? So tell me what y'all think. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.